is about the Southern Catchment organisation and their wonderful work. And let's give Martine the respect she deserves. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. And I have looked at the website. I do know people involved, and I really like what they've done. So over to you, Martine.
Thanks, Bill. So I'm Martine Franco. I'm the Executive Officer of Southern ACT Catchment Group. We are an organisation that has been around since 2003, and I think I've met some of you before at a previous presentation I've done for the council. I'll just tell you a little bit about us generally, and then talk a little bit about some of the programs that we roll out, and more importantly, I'll talk about some of the member groups that are across our whole catchment area, and specifically the ones that are in the Western Creek area. So that little white line there, healthy landscapes through an engaged community, that's our mission statement. So we're a not-for-profit organisation. We call ourselves the Landcare Network, and we're part of the bigger landcare networks in the country. We were formed in 2002, so we've been around for quite a long time, and we're one of 3 different catchment groups in the area. In the region, there's the Longwood Conservation Group and Gin and Dairy Catchment Group as well. And we also have a peak body, which is Landcare ACT, which is only a few years old actually. We see ourselves as an umbrella group, and that is because we support lots of small groups in the Southern ACT area. And our member groups are park care groups, urban land care groups, rural land care groups, and we also work with individual rural landholders as well in the Southern ACT. And most importantly, along the upper Murrumbidgee River, we do a lot of work with landholders around there around riparian restoration. We do actually have individual members as well. They're often people who've been part of one of those small volunteer groups and just sort of stay in contact with us and work with us. We do lots of things, like we are a very little organisation. I've got about 5 staff, but we're all part-time. I'm the exec officer, and we have a comms officer, project officer, water watch coordinator, and another 2 sort of project officers. I'll talk a little bit more about their work, but we're all part-time, so all up 3.6 full-time equivalent positions. So as a support network, our key function is to help other groups form, and I think one of the main things we do, which I think people know us for, is project development and project management. And that's because that's quite a sort of administratively heavy thing for community-based little small groups to do, because they're not incorporated associations like we are. So that project management work is mostly around going out on site to look at a patch that people look after, like fences and gardens, and talking about what people want to do, applying for grants, and linking people up, creating partnerships and getting stuff done on the ground. So that project management role is really quite large. We also help with volunteer recruitment, so we've just been to the Volunteer Expo on Saturday, and tomorrow we're going to the Seniors Expo, and that allows us to recruit more volunteers to our member groups. And we do lots of administration and financial management for projects and everything else. We do comms and promotion as well. So our Facebook presence has increased a lot since I got a lovely young comms officer, and which we never used to do as strongly, but now we do that quite a lot. And I think one of the things that we don't promote a lot, but what we do a lot of is support groups with building skills and knowledge around how to manage environmental assets. And that's something as volunteers in the community is not easily accessible through other organisations. So that's a really key thing that we do, support our volunteers to build their skills in things like weed identification, erosion management, revegetation projects, a whole lot of stuff. We're just building that general skills and knowledge in our long-term volunteer community. And our volunteer community is long-serving. We've been around more than me. I just talked about those we call it knowledge brokering services, but that's basically, us manning an office and having a sort of a community hub where people ring up and say, hey, do you know who I can get in contact with about, where I can learn to build a swale or whatever. So it's about linking with other organisations like science institutions, government agencies. We also very often act as a little bit of a middleman between ACT government, who is the land manager with, as you know, multiple tenures, and the community. So, and I'm sure you guys all know this, ACT government is it's quite a confusing place for community members when they want to get something done on public land, and so we help navigate through some of those policies and some of those approval processes required to get things done in the environmental landscape. We also have a very strong representative function, and what we mean by that is that we are part of a hierarchical system where we have our volunteers on the ground, our volunteer community members. They are in little small groups. We support those small groups. We support about 28 or 29 of them at the moment. And then we, with the other catchment groups, are part of a peak body called Landcare ACT, and then they are part of the national body called the National Landcare Network. And at that level, the National Landcare Network influences government policy in the Commonwealth. So it's a very significant role. We're able to be a key player in bringing up the voice of the community on the ground right up to that Commonwealth level. And I've been around for 10 years, so I'm on all. So I get to go to the National Landcare Network as well, so I get that great opportunity to see that sort of representative process work. And that means that somebody like yourselves will ring me up and say, I've got a real concern about this happening in our region, and if it's something that I'm hearing a lot of, then we can push those issues further. And as you probably know, we have citizen science programs too, like Water Watch, and we've also been doing some wildlife monitoring as well. There's a few other things. We have a drone that takes images of revegetation projects. We've been looking at tree health, so we're building that citizen science platform a little bit more as well. How we work. This is really important to us because there's many environmental organisations out there, and one thing that we really pride ourselves on is that we don't do anything if it doesn't come from the community. So if the community tells us this is what they're interested in doing, then we will respond. So we are totally community driven. Our committee is made up of community members, volunteers themselves. Most of them come out of the ranks of the Partnercare Landcare community. And so we're run by the community and we respond to the community. We're tenure blind, and that means that, like I said, there's many tenures in the ACT on public land, but we also work on private land as well. So we don't care where people are working, we don't care who manages the land. We're going to support people to do environmental restoration works regardless of who owns and manages the land. And because we are linked into the community so strongly, we're quite cost effective. So that means that we can often do things for very little money that the government can't do. And we also have very long, as I said, our volunteers are very long serving. Some of them have been doing it for 35 years. And our staff is pretty long serving too. So our Water Watch coordinator's been around for 12 years, I've been around for 10. So when we see a lot of change in institutions like ACT government around, that loss of information and corporate knowledge really does affect how community can operate. But for us, that corporate knowledge is really important to us. So we hold it. People love working for us, so we tend to keep staff and can keep that knowledge in the system. I want to talk a little bit about this activity. So I said that we've got 5 staff members. A couple of years ago, ACT government gave us a contract to deliver a community engagement and awareness program around the new healthy waterways that were being built. You probably all recognise there's about 19 structures built around the ACT in the urban landscape, and the one that you're probably most familiar with in this area is the whole Wetlands area. So the ACT government decided they wanted the community to start looking after these areas because they saw that was a cost-effective way of doing maintenance. And they also just wanted a general sense of stewardship to come out of the community to, have that sort of social investment in those public places and the community to be involved and understand why those structures were put in place in terms of a function to improve the water quality that was going into the catchment area. So we employed an urban water officer, her name's Hannah Edwards, and she's an environmental engineer. And she's been running this program for a couple of years, and she does lots of stuff. she promotes the H2OK messaging, and some of you might have seen that around. That's a campaign the ACT government are running to build awareness about water quality in the urban landscape. And she partners with all of the coordinators in government that manage volunteers to get stuff done in that urban landscape, particularly around those healthy waterway sites. And she does a lot of education around what those structures are for. So when the whole wetland site was completed and it came off, I forget what they called it, it was on it changed tenures from one government agency to the other. We ran a big open day out there. It was snowing and we had 200 people turn up. Lots of people interested. That was formed. And I think that was the last time I came and did a presentation to you guys. And then we formed a group. And so the community said, yep, we had a couple of people put their hands up as co-conveners. They started a group and they now do monthly working bees on that site. We've got a couple of projects that we got funded through some grants, so we're having bird and bee-friendly gardens in there. We ran bee hotel workshops. We're doing a hill scrape and sow to try and get native grasses back instead of the exotic grasses that were put in there by the rest of government. So there's a whole range of things that we're doing on that site, and it's great because it's a brand new group, and to see a brand new group in that sort of urban landscape, to keep the numbers coming, is fantastic. So they also do, I think, quite a bit of litter removal as well. It's not an easy landscape to work in because it's already really exotic. Like you're not moving into an area that is, like Red Hill, where you've got a sort of a native environment. If you've got a goal to move towards something that looks quite native, this is something that's already, it's got foreign infrastructure in it. It's got foreign species in it, so to try and bring back habitat and environmental value to it, it's complicated. But it's a good example of one that's worked quite well. And I think for us, that's one of the best healthy waterway sites with good community engagement in it. So Hannah is continuing to work with us to deliver workshops and to deliver engagement in around those healthy waterway sites and generally around water quality in the ACT. So she's been doing lots of education in schools about how to keep the water clean going into our waterways, helping with the leaf litter. I don't know if you guys have heard about the leaf litter programs. The ACT government have been trying to get the message out to people. There's certain things they can do to improve the quality of the water going into the urban waterways, to understand where stormwater comes from and where it goes to, and that it's not treated in the ACT. So I think a lot of people think when it goes in the drain, I think it's treated before it enters into the Murrumbidgee River catchment, but it doesn't. It goes straight into the Murrumbidgee River catchment. So doing things like reducing chemicals and cleaning products and dog poo and leaf litter in our stormwater drains is really important messaging. And that's why we've said to the basic government, yep, we'll keep working with the community to increase that awareness. Okay, so I'll talk about who our members are in a minute, but that's just, and I won't read through all that, but that's just a sort of a brief list of some of the services we provide for our members. Our members are very varied. Some of them have been going a long time and don't need us very much, and we call that a success. If we don't get a call from them for ages, which happens with Featherston fairly often, that means that they're not needing some help. But every now and then they go, hey, we'd like to do something. They give us a call, and maybe we'll in fact we've got to go to Featherston at the moment. Yeah. It's variable. We don't treat our members that they have to be in contact with us all the time. If they're on their own 2 feet, that's great. But these are the services that are available to us. So they'll still get newsletters and access to stuff. They'll still know if I'm writing a submission on something government's put out and I want no community opinion. They'll still get all that sort of stuff as well. And of course we've got lots of equipment, and lately we've got more equipment. We've now got a steam weeding machine and a drone that takes photos of aerially of good science. Okay, this is, I was hoping you could be bigger, but this is our, just been printing new brochures for ourselves and for our member groups as well. Yeah, beautiful new brochures. And I've cut off the ones at the bottom because we've got one down in Catchment, but it takes a lot of minute to have it right down there. We've got the push generators, they're older than us, they've been around for a long time. But as you can see, we've had 24 groups when we did the pamphlet a couple of months ago. We've now got another 4. In fact, there's another one that I've moved up there called Crow Park, which is in this actually. So you can see that there seems to be a lot more community interest in starting up these new groups, and we're not sure kind of where it's coming from, but we're finding that the community going, well, look, there's a park down the road from me. I'd really like to, build more shade there, maybe make it kid friendly, and maybe make it more animal habitat friendly or bee friendly. So, and we're seeing that the groups are starting to form faster than we've ever seen them form. Like it's taken 20 years to get those 24, and in the last month I've seen 4 new groups. So I don't know what's going on, but but it's a good thing.
Are they young people?
Yes. That could be the answer, and there might be some of the climate change stuff that's going on, and some of the natural disasters that is going on, making people want to get up and make a difference. That definitely could be a key driver.
We've just had B-Day again. B-Day on, Saturday here officially, but it's the 20th of September.
Yep.
And Paul's the first village with the bee-friendly gardens.
Yeah, see, that's great. I love that stuff. Yeah. And people are becoming much more aware as bees, as pollinators, and how important they are for ecosystem function. So that sort of messaging is starting to really filter into the community. Maybe it's just the level of environmental awareness and issues is just lifted generally in the community. So now we're seeing people wanting to volunteer, which is great. So, Holder Lakehead at Bill Kennedy Memorial Park is a great new little site. There's also Coolaman Farm Park, that's another great new site. And there's a couple around in the Tottenham Catchment. We're seeing quite a lot happening in the Woden area around the Hughes Griffith area, which is outside. So I just sort of put up a list of the groups that are in Western Creek area. Actually, I thought there was more, but I think more of them are in the Woden. So, but you'll see the 2 new ones there are the Coolaman Farm Park in Chapman and the Holder at Bill Kennedy Memorial Park. And those 2 groups came out of an environment grant. That very often happens. A grant comes up and people have been thinking about a park nearby and they go, you know what, there's a grant coming up. Maybe we should put a grant in. And the group sort of forms around that project. Which is a great way to start it, because there's a focus point and we can support them to start it, and we can hold their hand until government says, okay, you can be a formal group now. So yeah, there are your Western Creek groups, so you're not as alone as you It's great. And some of, so one at the top is the Holder Lakehead site, around about is on the left-hand side there. The blonde woman, she's actually the chair of our organisation, and she's the convener of the Holder Wetlands. Call themselves the Wetlands Group. Yeah, they might call it Holder Wetlands Volunteer Group. And down the bottom here is a group of volunteers on Coolaman Ridge. And we had a program called, we called it Land Care for Millennials, though the millennials didn't like that name. But what it was a roaming team of young people to help boost some of the work of the longer serving groups that had members in who were ageing and really would like a little bit more boost. So that was a great day of that, because we had like 15 millennials come and join Coolaman. The Coolaman group, and they were very excited and got a lot done. That's our strategic plan, which I don't expect you to read. But the most important thing about it is to say that we have 2 components of our plan, and that is we have community and we have environment, which I call landscape staff conservation. So they're the 2 main pillars of our organisation. And really our job is where those 2 things intersect. And serving the community is is all the way through. I've kind of done a simpler version of that since, which basically takes out all the landscape stuff and says, actually, we're just about community in the environment area. So that's our main focus, is enabling community to environmental restoration. That's pretty much all from me. That little picture is a little wallaby that we caught on one of our wildlife cameras, and I think it was on Farrow Ridge. So we have been putting wildlife cameras up, and this one is really cute. But if any of you are interested in knowing a little bit more about us, by all means go to our website. There's lots of information in there, and the list of our member groups are in there. And we're also keen to support new member groups forming. So if there's people in Western Creek that have a reserve or an urban park where they think some work could be done, where there's some potential to do some build more environmental benefits in the Western Creek area, then give us a call, because that's coming with it. Okay, questions?
John? Yeah, a comment. Sorry, I missed the beginning of your presentation. Not quite sure where your organisation fits in, so I apologise for that. I'm involved in the archery club down the road, and we've recently planted a large number of small trees and shrubs. And I don't know whether you know the area there, but
No, I don't.
it's sort of at the intersection of Dixon Drive and Street, I guess.
Oh, okay. Yep, we do know. Yep.
With floodplain at times, but the guy who was organising that seemed to get quite a bit of assistance from the government, who provided all the plants and came along with the water truck, and they helped dig the holes and we planted them. So
Were they part of, because you've got Stronglow Depot just there, don't you? So
not quite sure they came from there. I think they came from further afield.
Okay.
So I'm not quite sure what I'm saying, except that there's obviously other things going on as well.
There's lots
where
of
the community, if you can contact the right person in the government, you can lean on them to help you out. That's what happens us. So.
Yeah, that is what happens. And like I said, there is lots of other organisations that do that kind of work, and particularly ASD government, they're really keen to engage community. I mean, they're more community focused than I think people realise, and they'd love to do the job that we do, and they often will try and organise community events and try and assist as much as they can. They're restrained because they're a government agency and they're not generally employed to engage community in the way that a community-based not-for-profit would be. But there's both Parks and Conservation Service and Transport and City Services have volunteer management people, identified people, and in PCS they have rangers underneath them. They have 2 park care rangers, and in TCS I think there's just 2 of them, Helen McLean, and I don't know the new person's just been recruited. But they run a volunteer management section in TCCS, and they support volunteers. They tend to be that overwhelmed that they can only really do the administration side of things. There are other units in TCCS that are popping up all the time. One of them is called the Urban Tree Unit. So that might be, because there was, I don't know how many trees, but there was a lot of trees available for the Urban Tree Unit, and they were desperate to get them in the ground. So any time they found any community member that said, I want to plant trees, they were throwing trees at them and helping them get them in the ground. And that's still happening. So that was, I think there was an ACT minister who promised $1 million trees in Canberra or something like that, and there's been a lot of money. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's where that came from recently. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll shout. Can I shout? No. Thank you. For the viewers at home. Thank you for the viewers at home. Thanks for the presentation. A bit outside our area, but of interest, is areas like Molonglo and Stronglow Forest Park. And I notice you haven't got any green dots in there. Is there?
Oh, it's because it's not my catchment area.
Oh, right.
So,
Okay.
our catchment area is a little bit confusing, and that is because the Southern ACT catchment, there's no such thing as the Southern ACT River. So the other 2 catchment groups are Ginninderra Catchment Group, which is all the catchment of Jibidera Creek, and the Longlow Conservation Group, which is all the catchment of the Longlow River. So Southern sort of started up before Molonglo, and we started up in the Woden Western Creek area. So we started up in the Molonglo catchment as Southern Eastern Catchment Group. So we call ourselves a social catchment. We're everything south of the Cotter Road. So that's why, so the whole of Landcare Group, the whole of Wetlands Group, for instance, is our most northern group. So on the other side of the road, in the Molonglo, that's Molonglo Conservation Group. So we tend to, we sort of say that we support everything terrestrially happening in the Molonglo south of the Cotter, and anything in terms of water quality actually is data that is collected by the Molonglo Conservation Group Water Watcher Group. So we do a bit of sharing there, but we work very closely together as three organisations, so it's no big deal. It's just, that's just where our catchment boundary is.
All right, thank you.
I can ask a question.
Okay.
Is the car parking area behind the RSPCA and the fast food outlets on Cotter Road, is that covered by your group or by the Molonglo group?
So where are you? Are you north of the Cotter Road?
It's on the other side of the Cotter Road.
Yes, that's Molonglo. That's Molonglo.
That is Molonglo.
Yeah.
Just
And I don't think about car parks. You have to talk to me about green spaces because
my question is very targeted about runoff.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The service stations, the fast food outlet, the car park, particular runoff, wrappers, empty containers.
Yeah.
Are they a problem? Obviously, some would actually blow down to the whole wetlands.
Yes.
What's the incidence of rubbish in, I guess?
In whole wetlands,
Yeah.
I think when it started there was quite a lot of rubbish and like it happened pretty quickly. But because, and this happens all the time, once the community show interest in an area, you find that it just gets looked after. So, and I think that's because people see people in there picking stuff up, they see working bees, they see signs saying Landcare Group, active today, and I think that people go, oh, it's actually been looked after by volunteers and community look after it. Which, research say happens. That's why they, pay community artists to do graffiti instead of, instead of leaving walls blank, because that interest stops for the vandalism. So it's, and that bears out in these open landscapes as well. In terms of where that stuff goes, it absolutely goes into stormwater. And the big stuff that you're talking about is called gross pollutants, and that gets caught up in what we call gross pollutant traps before it goes in. So the big stuff isn't as much of an issue. Cleaning out the gross pollutant traps is something government probably should do more regularly, but again, that's sort of an expensive thing to do. But that's where that gross stuff, you should get caught before it enters into the whole wetland area. The whole wetland area, it's interesting because it does go into the Molonglo, but it's not on, it's called I think they call it, it's off, it's not on the actual, the flow line of the Molonglo. It takes some of the early flows off, diverts it through the wetlands and then it re-enters. So it doesn't take all the water off. And the reason they do that is, firstly, they can't take it all off, it'd be too big. But I think secondly, that's where the first flush of garbage and high nutrient loads is in that first flush. So that's why they call it it's an offline wetland, so it sits off to the side. And most of the healthy waterway sites do that kind of offline construction. And apparently there's money to do more. So they're apparently going to do more and more needed, which is great. And more in the south, which is fantastic.
Another question. Sorry, unless somebody else has got one. We have a fox problem over this way.
Yeah, I saw one on the highway yesterday. In the middle of the day.
Do you think there's a correlation between the healthy wetlands down there and other healthy spots and the rise of the fox population? We've got one who merrily strolls across park and through our cul-de-sac in the middle of the day.
Yeah, which is really unusual that's really unusual fox behaviour. But yeah, I was supposed to see
Oh,
one.
they're a beautiful creature.
Yeah, they are gorgeous, aren't they? But yeah, I mean, I saw a live one and then about 100 metres down the road, a dead one. So the population's obviously bigger. I think we're seeing them, this is just my opinion, I think we're seeing them because the populations are higher and there's just more of them out there that you're going to see the incidental one wandering around. Whether the wetlands have increased, I doubt that very much. There's lots of water sources all over the place for an animal as smart as a fox. So, yeah, I doubt it. But I'm no expert, I'm not a very good pest expert. Sorry? Yeah, that's right, there's a lot of chickens out there. I'm not no chickens.
Yeah, I was more worried that there was a problem
In the land you're dealing with and managing in terms of
Yeah,
fox holes, rabbit holes.
yes, absolutely. So, in terms of environmental issues, and you'll see it on our strategic plan if you've bothered looking at the detail, but which I don't remember really. But vertebrate pests are probably as important in terms of threats to natural ecosystems as invasive weed species. So they do an awful lot of damage to the land, and rabbits and pigs are an immense problem, not just in the rural landscape, but also in the urban landscape where there's urban open space. And they cause tremendous amounts of damage. So they damage soil, they allow, when they bare ground, they allow invasive weeds to come in. They're tremendously damaging. And we do have tremendous rabbit, fox, eastern red kangaroo, a whole lot of things that are threatening some of our ecosystems.
I've got my own one, but I'll just turn it on. Thanks, Martine. I just had a quick question around the size of groups. So most of those groups would seem like larger ones. I'm sort of wondering, like, if there's members of the community say there's a bit of an unloved park on their street. Is that the sort of thing that your group is able to, might only be a couple of neighbours, so we want to get together and improve a public place? Is that sort of within
How
the
big do you need to be?
Yeah.
Yeah. We have one of the groups we didn't put up there is called Croton Park. It's one guy. And that's a start.
Yeah.
There's also a new place in Gibbs Place in Canberra. That's one woman who's been actually going out there and weeding every day. And we support her as much as we can. And we just put in the grant for her. We don't really care if there's only one of you. But in terms of the government accepting you as a formal group, they won't accept a group that's that small. But we will support individuals to do work. It obviously, the more you can get, the merrier. And if there's an area that we see, because we often we do lots of planning at a landscape scale, and if we see there's a key area that's got some really significant environmental importance, and I'll give the example of Fisher Parkland, it's further into Canberra area. It sits between Mount Taylor and Urangi Hills and Coolman Ridge. It's got no particular environmental value in itself, but it's a weed source for those two areas. So when we saw something like that, when we're looking at the landscape, we say, we really need to get a group started there, and we will promote it as much as we can. We'll recruit or run an event out. So if that, and in the urban landscape, that's hard to know. But yeah, there will be some glaring holes that we'd be very happy for groups.
Great, and just one quick follow-up question as well. So, say you've got some people together and they're really keen to start up a group. What are the first things that you sort of typically get people to do or recommend that they do to improve the site?
Yeah. Look, it depends on the site. So the first thing we do is get one of our staff to come out and meet you on site, and Fiona Spear is the person we have mostly managing most of our groups. She's been managing her own group for 30 years. She's the convener of the whole Friends of Timberville. So she'll come out onto the site, or me, or one of the other staff, and look at what's on the site. So if it's just a park with nothing in it, well, we're starting from scratch there. So So, and it might not be that there's enough environmental value, and we'll say, look, this is just a park, it's not worth doing anything. But if it's got some old remnant yellow box root gum trees in it, we'll say those things are worth protecting. Let's see if we can do whatever, get some understory in there. So it depends on the ecological values of the park. It depends on the traffic. It depends in the urban landscape around asset protection. So we need for TCS mowers to be able to get in and get around stuff. We need to be able to reduce the risk of fire in some of those urban parks as well. So we can't just plant up shrubs right around the back of houses because the fire unit won't like us, and it increases the risk of fire too close to those houses. So we really need to just assess that landscape. It's often really obvious when you get out there and you walk around and you go, well, that's all really weedy. Or, hey, look, you've got a little patch of native grass, let's try and encourage that little native grass. So it's really about assessing what the environmental values are of that site. But 99% of the time, what you'll do as a group in your first meeting, and your meeting 10 years later, is weeding. So it is the principal activity, and it doesn't sound very sexy, weeding, but some people really enjoy it. And I think once you get into understanding what you're pulling out and what you're protecting and what comes back after you've weeded, people start seeing the value in revegetation activities. Definitely pull more of a crowd. So if you've only got you and a friend or you and a neighbour, we could do a letterbox drop and start up a little planting. Moors and Ponds, for instance, did that. Carolyn Lakuta actually started up that. Was it Moors and Ponds? Mawson and Monash confused, but I think it's Moors and Ponds. And she started did a little planting around those ponds, and has got lots and lots of locals involved, and we've supported her and run projects with her. So planting's a good way to start to get back. Somehow people like planting, they feel like they're doing something, they put a native plant in the ground, and they can come back and water it, watch it grow, and so planting's a good one. But monitoring, sometimes groups just start just by watching, monitoring what's happening in the area, recording what's in the area. Some groups are very science-based, and they go, we want to know everything about this little park or this reserve before we take a step at all. And so we'll gather data, gather a lot of data and find out about it.
I notice you've got the Bill Kennedy Park up there.
Yeah.
Andrew is one of the people behind it.
Yep.
Regularly comes to our meeting. Maybe we could connect Liam up with Andrew, because they've only recently done that, haven't they?
Actually, well, and I think Andrew recommended that we come back. So we did know that, yeah.
Great.
And I think he's one of those people that kind of not known we've been there, and there's a bit of a surprise that we're there and going, oh my God, there's all the stuff that you do. People should know more about what's happening. Yeah.
Andrew, if you're listening, we can come talk to you. Thank you very much to Martine. I really enjoyed it. I hope you all did too. Anyway, we better move on to our actual meeting. I'm already in trouble with myself. I forgot the acknowledgement of country, so it's okay to get to Martine. But we're honoured to be meeting on the ancestral lands of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge these First Australians as the traditional custodians of this land, whose cultures are among the oldest in human history. We pay respect to the elders of the communities in the Murrumbidgee region and extend our recognition to their descendants past, present and future. At our presentation, I'll now move on to the minutes of the April meeting, and I'll at the table there. You all have a look at them. Are they okay? Is there
Only one spelling error. Sterling has an L in it, not two R's.
Okay. Sterling is misspelled. We'll fix it. Thank you, Rosemary. Can I get you to move them this way?
Yes, I'm happy to move.
Second. Yes, oh yeah. Oh. No, that's good. Thank you. That's easy. Just drop a letter. Thanks, Joe. It's really good to see people actually read the things. But you can't hear. Oh, we did on that. Okay, so is there any business arising from those minutes? No worries. You should have stretched that out. We now get to the chair report. Brace yourself. What's has happened? Well, we don't have the MLAs here first. Excuse me. Are you not hearing this at all?
No, it was just that discussion earlier. I missed.
Firstly, I think we'll go to the MLAs. We had a number of apologies because of the Sue Zoltos memorial services on tonight. You remember Sue was killed in that motorcycle accident on Commonwealth Avenue Bridge. Quite a distinguished senior Canberran and a very sad event about 2 years ago, Mark? About 2 years ago. So there should be some media on it tomorrow, but so we've had 2 apologies there. We've had the resignation of Julia Jones, or we foreshadowed the resignation of Julia Jones. It's looking like we'll have a new MLA in a week or so. So we'll try to reach out to them as soon as we know who they are for certain, and let them know that we're still here and we're decent people. They should come and talk to us. And Mr. Hanson, I don't know where you are, quite frankly.
Probably home. Home and work tomorrow.
I hope he's at home watching our broadcast on the Facebook feed. Yeah, but I'm here, it's down there. So, Chair. That's exactly what I said, Nora. She's put in an intention to resign, but it apparently is triggering the recount anyway. I don't know the permutations. I thought they had to formally resign, but that hasn't. But let's see where it goes. So, since last newsletter, quite a bit's going on. COVID's still well and truly out there. Lots of people are getting into isolation, getting infected. Fortunately, they're vaccinated, so the implications probably aren't as bad, but there are still people in ICU, so I guess I'm just saying we still need to be careful, and you've still got the flu about to roll. I guess you'll see lots of people walking around here with sore arms from getting vaccinated. It doesn't hurt me. Or am I a silk?
No.
Yeah. Okay. The revised planning law consultations going on. Now, I've got a view that it's not fit for purpose, and I'm consulting around the committee, and I really do invite anybody who might have a view to get it to council. We've gotten comment by the 15th of June, so we are working on a submission. My interpretation, heavily on governance, I think it lets us down in terms of it shifting all the accountabilities to the wrong spot, away from the Assembly into the Chief Planner, the Planning Authority. I think that's got some inherent dangers. And thinking through the commentary, I'm thinking part of our commentary should be around the governance. There's also an over-reliance on moving into making decisions and communicating by notifiable instrument, which means they'll never be debated in the Assembly. So the planning minister can sign off on something, he signs off. Signs it off, it goes into law. It can only be dealt with by the Assembly screaming, which means the community will scream. Chances are people won't pick up on it until many years down the track, until it affects them. Not a good way to operate, in my view. Also, I don't believe the consultation with the community has been that good. It's lots of documents dumped. I think it was 700 odd pages. It's a hell of an effort to wade through and even understand the concept. It's very much written in the perspective of an administrating program of what would make their life easy. I think that's my current view. I'm happy to be convinced otherwise. So yeah, we're encouraging people to get on with that. Now, I put a comment in the report about a journalist ignoring comments I've made in a public forum and putting views he favoured, not ours. Well, I won't pick up his freebie giveaway in the supermarket anymore. Brearley Street. We met with the Brearley Street team last week. We've now had 2 consultations. There'll be a further consultation in a number of weeks. They're starting to refine the plans. They're starting to get down to where they think it will be heading. They're not being overly committal yet, but what is becoming clear is the budget is underdone. It looks like after all the overheads, there's about $1.5 million to actually spend on the ground in Brearley Street. Now, I think that's not going to get a lot. I don't think it's going to get us to where we would like it to be. We're currently drafting the budget letter, and there'll certainly be an ask in there for a little bit more money to actually make it do the job. On detail, I can't really talk about the detail. We've seen 2 sort of options, and they're still mucking around with them, but they're pretty much the options that were in the surveys last year. So let's just leave that. Village, the consultation closed. Thank you to everybody who participated in that consultation. I think it was one of the better efforts I'd seen in terms of consulting with developers, which I think it was the best. And it was the spirit of people who came to it with. We got a lot of concessions, so if you want to move over there and you think about an EV, that input came from somebody in one of those consultations. They're putting EV charging in, they're doing solar charging. They've changed the plan significantly. There's a few bits and margins, but what is really now concerning is potentially there'll be 1,000 new residents on that corner. And I'm thinking, we've got the 2 main streets, and Ison. And we've also got Zagrana. Green. Get it wrong every time. And we think the traffic implications will be quite savage. Now, on the corner of Street and Drive, we understand there was another bicycle car collision there on Saturday afternoon. Or was it Sunday? Over the weekend, there was a car collision, and Both people were quite distraught, I understand. The driver of the car and the cyclist was on the ground with injuries. But I think it's at capacity now. The survey work says it's not, but my broken glass survey says I think it is. So we're in the process of writing a note and making representations to TCCS, to the Minister. We're trying to secure the Minister now for the July meeting to talk about their plans and to address these concerns. So I don't want any further input, and we also mentioned in the submission that it was coming. So I understand they do read the submissions. They tell me they do. Other things going on. Unfortunately, in the newsletter, I called it the Urban Tree Bill. I should have read that more closely. The Urban Forest Bill is out for consultation. Would appreciate any comments on that in the next few days. It closes the 2nd of June. The budget itself closes 27th of May. So if you've got an idea, and people have been, as a result of this and the other note, we have had some input, mainly on the budget. Like, one of them is why doesn't the R7 actually connect with the local buses rather than the local buses leave before the R7 arrives? 28 minutes here, who cares? When it's cold and freezing out there, you do care. Okay, Fix My Street. Still going on. Had a call the other day, somebody rang me from TCCS. I'm talking about Fix My Street. Ah, good. I don't know that we got far, but he understands that we are collecting information. He understands we're not happy, and he understands that we understand they have got a problem in terms of how they manage it. And it's very easy to get complaints about the operation of that, but it's a basic municipal function. And there are safety issues that are left hanging for too long. There's an open pit in Blackwood Terrace. It's been opened with that orange stuff kicked into it for 8 or 9 weeks. There's things like this everywhere. People trip over, people put a leak down there. The one in Hull is on the route of the walking school bus from St Jude's. So it's quite if you know Blackwood Terrace, you know how busy it can get. So I hope they fix it before somebody falls down. Now, both Jeremy Hansen and Marissa Patterson have said they are accepting representations about the format of Fix My Street. We don't want them being too lonely, so maybe we should also let them know if we're not satisfied. Okay, moving on to Raiders. The Raiders have applied to deconcessionalise their lease on the club site. Now, my take on it is what they're saying at the moment, they just want to deconcessionalise it. Now, intuitively, there's got to be a bit more. There's a story in the Riot Act today about it. Why would you pay money to the government to take over the lease on commercial rates from the government on a block of land that's in CZ6 zone if you don't have plans for it? Now, Ian Bushnell, the Riot Act, managed to get out of the Raiders. They're saying, yeah, we'd like to do something with that car park. So the story keeps growing. We need to watch it. What's the big risk to the community? Besides this room, there's really nowhere else except the Raiders Club for a small club or organisation to get a meeting room. And we all know how hard, if we're involved in any organisations, how hard it is to get a meeting room. Here it costs money, over there's free. It doesn't work for our big meetings, but it certainly works for smaller meetings, and I imagine lots of organisations are the same. Now, the small, where's Featherston Garden go? Over there. That's money that's come from volunteers or government grant. It goes, if they come here, that's money that could have been used on doing their other work. You have to meet. It's legislation that says your committee has to meet. It's also very sensible that you meet to work through your issues. So I think that's a watch this space, but they're taking submissions. I would suggest if you feel strongly about it, you lodge it, a few words, a few lines. It doesn't take a lot. It could be, I'm really worried we will lose the meeting rooms. Though I think watch this space. We'll have a bit more to say over the coming weeks. We'll probably put another post out in the near future for the newsletter or on the website, just on where our thinking has taken us. Okay, really, that's about it from me. It's the shortest meeting ever, I think, it's any of this. But are there any questions at all from anybody on anything we missed, should be doing, Val's lining up for beauty, sure? Well, they're proposing to take the lease from the current concessional status into a market-based lease. So they'll pay market value
To the government.
to the government.
Are you talking about the block of land from the end of the rates to Breedley Street?
We're talking the whole Raiders.
The whole,
Yeah, the car park, the clubhouse.
what are they going to do?
Nobody knows.
So they could be graded back.
No. The Raiders will own it, in effect. A bit like you own a block of land your house is on. The really interesting thing in there is part of the fee they pay to government will be derived from the revenue they get from surrendering redundant poker machines. So the poker machines, the government's giving a subsidy to be surrendered. I think you'll find the Raiders group are madly transferring poker machines from all over Canberra over to here to get the credit to buy land. So it may well be quite a generous transaction. So we're digging more into it. Don't want to put anything certain on in terms of figures, but it just doesn't look right to me. But the risk for us is we lose access to valuable meeting rooms in the community. Mark?
Bill, should we invite them to come along and present on their application and engender some sort of confidence?
I think that's an excellent idea. Burden Consultants are handling it. We did go to 2 meetings over there when it was first proposed. They might have done their consultation, or they might feel more generous and come and talk to us. I don't know. I can only but ask.
So who's pushing this, the Raiders or the government?
The Raiders. Well, there's clearly a benefit, or they wouldn't enter into a financial transaction. There's a benefit somewhere. I'm not on the Raiders board. I'm a Raiders member because I occasionally go over and go onto the meat raffles, see John over there playing on his device, have a beer occasionally. But seriously, there is a benefit somewhere. And I think we just need to watch and wait. My personal feeling is once they get that, there will be a second DA to develop the site. Now, being a CZ, it's sort of commercial recreational zone, so you could put a casino on the site, you could put small businesses, you could put an apartment hotel. You can't develop apartments. Residential apartments is about the only thing you really can't do. You can put underground car parks, you can do small business suites, offices, lawyers, accountants, that sort of thing, doctors. I thought we need more medical facilities, criminal courts, everything up. I don't know what else, but you can see very easily a 5-storey building there offering who knows what. The cinema would be nice, wouldn't it?
After the stories are nice.
But that's a big box, so we wouldn't be allowed to do that.
It wants it for levels.
Yeah.
We're going to invite,
Sorry?
we're going to take this suggestion and invite them to come.
I've already agreed to that, Nora. We will send them an invitation, bring them
I'm
up.
waiting to be back.
We'll ask them. We haven't done it yet. He only just thought of it. He's told me I haven't had time to put this down and run over and get the phone and ring somebody. Okay?
Invite that straight away.
Yeah, that might come here.
Yeah.
Okay. But
They're competing with the colonies, huge proposals.
exactly.
So that Warren Westwood.
So what else is out there? This could be a bit of an introduction to brownfields development around here. Because, 1970s type buildings are probably at the used by. Could it be the beginning of more development or not? We don't know. It might be welcome development. We can't just turn and say we oppose development. It's, are we going to get development sensitive to the area? And that links back to the planning laws as well. If the planning laws are just made totally unvetted, and we have limited say, who knows what we'll end up with. So we just need to be mindful of can they give us something consistent with our own aspirations of what we want the area to look like. We came here because we were attracted to an area and we could see a future. Let's just hope we get that. John?
It's the presumption that the club would still be operating.
John, that could be one of the assumptions. Definitely. We're working in a vacuum. They could very well go underground on the car park site for car parking, build 5 stories above it as commercial and continue to operate the club and connect them. I think in the Raiders, if you read the Raiders papers, their AGM papers, my reading is they're heading away from operating licensed clubs and heading into commercial real estate to support the rugby league team. Their objective is not really to provide community facilities. Their objective is to support those 17 guys in Lime Green who get out the Bruce Stadium area or Canberra Stadium area second weekend. But where are they going to get the best bang for their buck to do that?
Well, I would never clue. I don't know whether that's their own motive, but I think that an incredibly negative reaction from the local community and wider if the club was suggested that it would disappear. They might concentrate their efforts in other localities.
Look, I don't want to panic anyone. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
They're realistic options. We need to be aware of it. My feeling is they'll develop the club grounds. It doesn't make sense to me otherwise. They might land bank it until the market looks good. It takes a few years to even get the plans together for these things. So we'll just see where it goes. But I think it's important council, and tell me if you think we're wrong, I think council needs to say, what about the community spaces, the valuable community spaces and resource provided by that building? Anything else I should add to it? You can go away and think about it, have a chance now.
Well, I support, I think it's an incredibly valuable community asset. You might like the packages, but there's a lot of other good socialising and that goes on.
And that's been council's position since this first appeared. We might even paraphrase your own words there, because they sound pretty good. I say John said. No, I appreciate that, John.
Well, I think that's why I think the reaction of the local populace would be incredibly meaningful.
Well, they did it in Bratton. And the populace.
They were angry too, I don't know.
Yeah, they were really angry. They're still really angry. But there's a block of apartments and some sort of gymnasium on the side now.
That's their train.
Well, is that there now or is it moved again?
Well, like I actually think if they act like that structure in the street is, I don't think what the name of the street is, the one with all the trees in it.
Uruguay? Mort Street?
No.
Lonsdale? It's the cross street. It's the cross
It
street.
runs parallel to Northbound Avenue.
It's the third one across. Northbound, isn't it?
I'm looking up. Well, no, what I just, they had Northbound Oval or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Was there a club there?
I thought there was a clubhouse there.
Well, whatever else is there, they've emasculated that whole block. There's still a footy field there, but you couldn't actually have a game there because there's nowhere for any crowd to stand and watch. And they built a very long building, like 60 metres long, which is the elite training thing out for the Raiders. Particularly ugly building, I might say, because it's virtually got no windows on the street side. And then in the corner they've jammed a whole lot of units. And I personally, I think that was a retrograde decision because it's emasculated quite a unique sort of sporting facility in the middle of the city, which is now gone. Anyway, I mean, I hadn't thought about it for ages.
Oh, thank you. I have no visibility over the road.
I suspect the building, which I say is ugly, if you look on the other side, it's probably all glass looking at the field, and it's probably very hunky-dory. But on the back side, it looks like we had a arsehole daisy or something. No windows, no nothing.
I seem to recall they got some money from the New South Wales government to build that centre for excellence too. Anyway, is there anything else anybody wants to raise?
I was going to do that whether it's appropriate for whether the council might like to write a letter to Julia Jones to have
No interest in her political views or her non-political views, but I think she's done a pretty good job turning up to the meetings and things here, having a go. So just on that score, I reckon it might be worth it.
In response to that, yes, we are doing it. A number of members of the committee have made some quite positive comments about Julia. Hi Julia, if you're watching. We have seen Julia do some real good local member advocacy in the community. And we've seen her do things that she doesn't talk about, but she's effectively done it. We saw her intervene and assist and identify an issue in a social housing complex in our area. Came across it, totally by accident, and was able to get it resolved very quickly, which is totally unlike what you hear from a lot of other complexes. I was totally amazed that the Julia Jones name made it happen. There were journalists there with us, yet she kept them away from it, which was quite fantastic. There was a couple of other things during the pandemic that she identified and went out and used her own connections and resources to help resolve. So there's those sort of things that are the memory of Julia. We've had a couple of private meetings with Julia and met a few of her kids, and I don't know if anybody's met any of her kids, but they're entertaining, they're delightful. I think my favourite's Ambrose, he's about 9. And a lot of fun. And he loves strawberries. But putting all that aside, she's going on to look after the family and attend to her own family circumstances. I expect we will see her in public life somewhere. But we are going to write a letter to her. Michelle's already provided input. I put some words down against a Facebook post in the Canberra Times, and I believe other people have made a number of other very positive, strong comments about it. So yes, the council is going to do that at the appropriate time. But thank you for reminding me. Anything else? Come on, Mark, want to go home? Want to go home? Okay, can I declare the meeting closed? Thank you.